Welcome back, friends. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel for new videos. And today we are going to discuss about the connections of thalamus, the second part. So in the previous class we have discussed about the anterior nucleus, and also we have discussed about the medial group. And now we are going to discuss about the lateral group nucleus of the thalamus. Let us see that. In this picture we can identify the right and left thalamus over here. And coming to this picture, we can identify, already have shown you the internal medullary laminae, and this group we have discussed, that is anterior group, and also we have discussed about the lateral dorsal nucleus, dorsal medial nucleus, and also the parvo-magnocellular parts we have discussed. And now we are going to discuss about the lateral group. In this lateral group already have discussed the ventral anterior, ventral lateral we have seen, and now we are moving to the ventral posterior group. So this ventral posterior group, again it has divided into two parts: ventral posterolateral, ventral posteromedial groups. So coming to the ventral posterolateral group. So ventral posterior group, it is divided into two parts: medial group and the lateral group. And this part we are going to separate it, and we are seeing over here. So what are the afferent connections or input of this ventral posterolateral group and ventral posteromedial group? So the ventral posterolateral group is connected with the medial lemniscus of the pons, and also the spinal lemniscus of the pons, So these are the two afferent connections or inputs of ventral posterolateral group. And moving to the other connections, we can identify the spinal lemniscus. It is also connecting to the centromedian or the nucleus which is present in the internal medullary laminae, that is called as centromedian nucleus, or it is also called as intralaminar nuclei. It is also connected with the spinal lemniscus. Okay, so that is about the connections or afferent connections or input of the ventral posterolateral group. And also this ventral posterolateral group is not only connected to the spinal lemniscus, and also the spinal lemniscus, it is also connected to the medial geniculate bodies. And now moving to this ventral posterolateral and ventral posteromedial, again it is going to be into three groups: lateral, medial, and the intermediate. So here we have ventral posterolateral group over here, ventral posteromedial group over here. So let us see that ventral posterolateral group, again it is going to divide into three parts: lateral, medial, and the intermediate. So this brown color one, light brown color one is lateral, red color one is medial, and this green color one is intermediate. So with which parts it is going to connect? Let us see that. So first, from the lower limbs, it is going to connected with the lateral group of ventral posterolateral nucleus. Okay, so the lateral group is connected with the lower limb connections to the lateral group, and then the trunk and the body. It is going to connected with the intermediate group, whereas the upper limb it is going to connect with the medial group. Okay, so the limbs with the medial, upper limbs with the medial, lower limbs with the lateral, and the trunk with the intermediate group of ventral posterolateral nucleus. And moving to the ventral posteromedial group, here we have two different nucleus. One is trigeminal nucleus. It is going to connect with the lateral group of ventral posteromedial group. Okay, trigeminal nucleus of the pons, which is connected to the lateral group of ventral posteromedial. Okay, then solitary nucleus, it is going to connect with the lateral group of ventral posteromedial group. So this track is called as trigeminothalamic tract, and here you can identify solitary nucleus of medulla oblongata. It is going to connect with the lateral group of ventral posteromedial. This track is called as solitarothalamic tract. And moving to the intermediate group of ventral posteromedial, from the head and the neck and the face, it is going to connect with the intermediate group of ventral posteromedial group. Okay, ventral posterior medial group. So that is about the ventral posterior medial intermediate. Whereas the taste sensations from the tongue, it is going to reach to the ventral posterior medial group, strictly ventral posterior medial and medial group of ventral posterior medial. Okay, so already I have told you ventral posterior nucleus, it is going to divide into two parts. Okay, so medial and lateral. Again, medial is going to divide into three parts, lateral is going to divide into three parts. So this medial group again, it is divided into three parts: lateral, intermediate, and the medial. Lateral is a blue color one, purple is intermediate, yellow color one is medial. So the taste sensations from the tongue, they reaches to the ventral posterior medial group, strictly medial group of ventral posterior medial. Okay, whereas touch and the temperature, they reaches to the lateral group of ventral posterior medial, and the temperature is reaching to the intermediate group of ventral posterior medial group. So this is about the ventral posterior medial group or ventral posterior nucleus. Okay, that is about the inputs of ventral posterior nucleus. Whereas the output of the ventral posterior nucleus, it is going to connect with the postcentral gyrus. Okay, so already I have discussed about the postcentral gyrus in the functional areas of the cerebrum. That is area number 312, whereas in the postcentral gyrus, they are connected. They are connected with the ventral posterior nucleus. So the output of the thalamus, output of the ventral posterior nucleus, they connected to the postcentral gyrus. Postcentral gyrus. Okay, so how they are connected? Through the superior thalamic fasciculus. Whereas the projections of the fibers of the ventral posterior nucleus to the cortex are somatotropical, so that the lateral part of the nucleus, they are connected to the lower limb area, are connected to the cephalic part. Got it what I'm saying? So the lower limb, they are connected to the cephalic part. And medial part of the nucleus, that is head, face, and neck, they are projected to the caudal part. Okay, so upper part is connected, lower limb, upper part. Okay, so postcentral gyrus, upper part is connected to the lower limbs, lower part is connected to the face and the head. Face and the head of postcentral gyrus. It is almost reaches to the posterior ramus of lateral sylvian fissure. That is about the ventral posterior nucleus. And the special feature is the ventral posterior nucleus, when present, receives input from the ascending vestibular pathways and projects fibers to the caudal part of postcentral gyrus. Okay, it is close to the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus. That's already I have told you about it. Then the function is it acts as largest specific somatosensory relay nucleus of the thalamus. Okay, so that is about the ventral posterior nucleus. So this is the image how the lower limbs are connected with the cephalic part of postcentral gyrus and the caudal part, which is connected with the to the face and the head and the face. So this is about the primary somatosensory cortex, that is postcentral gyrus. Yes, coming to the medial geniculate bodies. So far we have seen the three different nucleus: ventral anterior, ventral lateral, and ventral posterior nucleus. And now we are seeing the two different bodies which are present posterior to the ventral posterior nucleus. They are called as medial geniculate bodies and the lateral geniculate bodies. So here in this picture we can identify the medial geniculate bodies over here, lateral geniculate body is here, and this is called as posterior end of the thalamus, called as pulvinar. And now posterior inferiorly we can identify posterior to the midbrain, we can identify superior colliculus and the inferior colliculus, and here you can identify the pineal gland. Now moving to this medial geniculate body, it is receiving inputs from lateral lemniscus from both ears. First let us see that. So from both ears, and is reaching to the lateral lemniscus, and is reaching to the inferior colliculus, and then from inferior colliculus it is reaching to the medial geniculate bodies. So that is about the process input of this medial geniculate bodies. So the high frequencies are located in the medial part, whereas the low frequencies are present at the lateral part. Okay, high frequencies are present at the medial, low frequencies are present at the lateral part of this medial geniculate bodies. And coming to the output of this medial geniculate bodies, let us see that. So the output of this medial geniculate bodies, most of the fibers project into the primary auditory cortex through the auditory radiation. Some fibers from the medial geniculate body are projected to the ventral and the lateral thalamic nucleus and to the pulvinar. Okay. Yes, in this picture we can identify how the medial geniculate body is connected to the ventral anterior nucleus and ventral lateral nucleus. And also here we can identify how it is connected to the posterior end of the thalamus or the pulvinar end of the thalamus. So that is about the output of the medial geniculate bodies. Yes, moving to the posterior thalamic zone. What is this posterior thalamic zone is? So coming to this medial geniculate bodies, it is going to divide into two parts. One is a magnocellular part and dorsal parvocellular part. So earlier what I have discussed is the dorsal parvocellular part. Then coming to the magnocellular part. So anterior to this one is the magnocellular part. So this magnocellular part is also called as posterior thalamic zone. So it is receiving the bilateral input from the spinothalamic tract and ascending reticular pathway. And it is concerned with the perception of the painful and the nociceptive stimuli and the pain. It is reaching to the magnocellular part of medial geniculate bodies. Then coming to the efferents. So this is the efferents or input, whereas the output of this magnocellular part is the fibers from the nucleus are projected to the secondary somatosensory area. So where it is exactly located is it is present just above the posterior ramus of lateral sylvian fissure. So above the posterior ramus of lateral sylvian fissure, here we can identify the secondary somatosensory area. So that area is connected to this magnocellular part. Okay, the output from the magnocellular part is reaching to the secondary somatosensory area. Okay, that is about the posterior thalamic zone. Then moving to this, here you can see that. And coming to the lateral geniculate bodies. So the lateral geniculate bodies is ventral part of the lateral geniculate body is rudimentary in man and is a derivative of zona incerta of the subthalamus. So the dorsal part of lateral geniculate bodies forms a significant elevation beneath the pulvinar. So here you can see the posterior end or pulvinar end of the thalamus. Just below the pulvinar end of the thalamus, you can identify the projection. This is called as the lateral geniculate bodies. So this elevation, it is going to divide into two parts. Let me show you clearly one by one. So this is lateral geniculate body. And this lateral geniculate body also, it is going to divide into two parts, anterior part and the posterior part. So strictly speaking, this lateral geniculate body is projecting anteromedially. This is the anterior part, ventral part or anterior, and this is the posterior part or dorsal part. So these lateral geniculate bodies, they are projecting anteromedially. Anteromedially. So the dorsal part is projecting posterolaterally. Posterolaterally. Okay, so the dorsal part of the lateral geniculate bodies forms a significant elevation beneath the pulvinar end of the thalamus and consists of 6 layers of neurons. 6 layers of neurons. So this part we are going to separate and try to see the interior of the dorsal part of the lateral geniculate body, and we can identify the 6 layers of neurons. 6 layers of neurons we can identify. So the shape is, it is a horseshoe shape. It's a horseshoe shape mass with the hilum directing. Hilum, it is directed ventromedially. Ventromedially. The layers are counted from inside to outside. So this is the first one, first layer, second layer, third layer, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So these are the 6 layers where we can identify the lateral geniculate bodies. Strictly dorsal part of the lateral geniculate body, we can identify the horseshoe shaped neuronal masses. Neuronal masses. So we are naming from inside to outside. We named it. They named it from inside to outside. So almost 1 million neurons, about 1 million neurons are estimated to be present in the dorsal part of each lateral geniculate body in human. Okay, let us see that, how it is going to connect. And this is, so between every layer of neurons, we can identify the optic tract. So the layers are counted from inside to outside, means from center to the periphery, and are separated one another by the optic tract. This gray color one, I'm just showing you how the optic tract is separating or present between the 2 layers of the cells. Okay, so 2 layers of the cells. Yes, coming to the input and output of this lateral geniculate bodies. So input and output are afferent and efferent connections of it. So the input fibers are afferent fibers coming from retinofugal fibers. Retinofugal fibers of the optic tract. So in this picture, we can identify the optic tract which is present over here, and here you can identify this elevation is called as the lateral geniculate body. So for our understanding, I have separated it and I'm showing you in a separate picture how the optic tract which is connected to the lateral geniculate body. So the retinofugal fibers of the optic tract which are connected to the lateral geniculate body, so that there are 2 different fibers are there, crossed and uncrossed fibers. So the crossed fibers of the tract terminate in the lamina number 1, lamina number 4, and lamina number 6. So these are the crossed fibers. Crossed fibers, they are going to terminate in the lamina number 1, lamina number 4, and lamina number 6. Whereas the uncrossed fibers, they are reaching to the lamina number 2, lamina number 3, lamina number 5. 2, 3, 5 uncrossed fibers. Crossed fibers, they are reaching to 1, 4, and 6. So here you can see the lateral geniculate body and how it is reaching. So each fiber on reaching an appropriate laminae, it makes synapse with the 5 or 6 neurons. 5 or 6 neurons showing divergence. At the same time, each neuron is connected with a number of fibers suggesting convergence. So here it is going to diverge, and then from all the neurons, the fibers are going to converge. Okay, so a minute lesion of the retina produces transneuronal generation in the 3 laminae of the lateral geniculate body. So the retinal projection of the lateral geniculate body is somatotopical. So upper quadrants of the peripheral retina. Remember carefully, listen carefully. Upper quadrants of the peripheral retina are projected to the medial part, and lower quadrants to the lateral part of the nucleus. Lower quadrants of the peripheral retina is reaching to the lateral part. Okay, then the macular fibers occupy a large wedge shaped intermediate area in the dorsocaudal part of the nucleus. So the nucleus receives few afferent fibers from area number 17. Yeah, here you can see that. So from area number 17, it is receiving from some input fibers coming from the area number 17, that is primary visual cortex, through optic radiation. These fibers may exert presynaptic inhibition of the retinofugal fibers of the optic tract and thereby help in neural sharpening of the lateral geniculate bodies. Okay, that is about the input of the lateral geniculate bodies. Then moving to the output or efferent fibers, they are reaching to the principal output of the lateral geniculate body is projected to the primary visual cortex. Okay, primary visual cortex. It is also receiving the output. So input and output, the area number 17 is playing a major role. And how this output is reaching is, it is passing through the optic radiation or geniculocalcarine tract. Geniculocalcarine tract. Geniculo means the geniculate, lateral geniculate body. Calcarine. So already have discussed about the sulci and gyri over there. So the calcarine sulcus which is present here. So it is reaching to the geniculate bodies to the calcarine area. So the tract name is geniculocalcarine tract. So the macular fibers are projected into the posterior part of the visual cortex and the peripheral retina is represented in its anterior part. So some output fibers of the lateral geniculate body are connected with the pulvinar end. So let us see that. So the lateral geniculate body is connected to the ventral anterior and ventral lateral nucleus also, and also they are reaching to the posterior end of thalamus, that is pulvinar end of the thalamus. So that is the short description about the ventral posterior nucleus, medial geniculate body and lateral geniculate body. So these things once again you just study and just try to draw the diagram so that you can remember for a long time. And in the next class we are going to discuss about the lateral dorsal nucleus, lateral posterior nucleus, and also we are going to see the intralaminar nuclei and the pulvinar part of the thalamus, and also the last and not least the reticular thalamic nucleus and the midline nucleus. So let us see in the next class. Till then, see you.